Welcome to the Matt Wilkie podcast.
So, we're going to go over some very old stuff. I've had an internet troll called Evan Iliadis for many years now. And I want to explain where he came from. His issues in the Philippines go back long before I even got to the Philippines. I've seen stuff that he's done since 2005. He's had issues with the Rotary Club. He's had issues with pretty much everything. These people appear now and again. But what I'll do is I'll actually explain how I ended up being targeted by him. Now, he started this website called the Sexpat Wall of Shame a long time ago, and I noticed some of the people appearing on it I actually knew from around Cebu, and I actually approached Paul Petra about this, and I said, look, this guy's writing about you on the, he's like, I know, and I said, and that's like, what's his issue with you? And it went back to a forum issue, because Paul Petra owns Living in Cebu forum, and I didn't think much of it at the time, but just remember I'd had this conversation because I was at a pool party where the expats basically meet up, have a drinking session, go for a swim. Happens like every few months. So that was me discussing it with Paul at the time. Now, Paul is a bit of a character. It's not somebody I would normally sit and. It's not somebody I would call a friend. He's not somebody I would call an acquaintance as such. It's more somebody I just know from my transition to Cebu originally in 2007. But generally, he's not too bad. Some of his issues are related to the way he treats people, but that's why he's not on my friends list. But anyway, so moving forward, I noticed some of the stuff that was being written was very strange. It wasn't written properly. It seemed randomly ranting. But it wasn't really anything I was really too concerned about. It was just that the site had appeared online. I didn't know anything about this even character. I didn't know why he was creating this wall. But then something happened in Minglanilia. There was actually a child murder. Ella Joy was a 6-year-old child that was murdered in the area, and there was a a sketch made of the alleged kidnappers, etc. And it was me that actually put those online. You can probably still Google them and you'll probably see when they went on, so you'll get an exact date of when things happened, because I went to Minglanilia police station, asked for a copy of the sketches, then I scanned them and uploaded them. But there was 2 couples arrested relating to this. The first couple were the Burgess. The Burgess were basically picked out at the airport. This was basically an exercise that I can only describe loosely as pick out a foreigner from the airport. They took a couple of kids along, and that's exactly what happened. They picked up a couple, they charged them for the murder, blah blah blah. But then the video footage showed the Burgess in a hotel, from the CCTV footage at the hotel, in the hotel reception and in the restaurant at the time of the murder. They were, even though they sort of shown that they weren't even in the area and it was miles away from where the murder had happened and the case collapsed, they still did not clear the people's name. They turned around and said there was a lack of evidence. There was actually evidence to show they weren't actually there at all, but there was a lack of evidence according to the court system. Now, politically, there was stuff going on with Gwen Garcia, because after this mess up, because she'd actually promised to actually deal with it and bring the culprits to jail and justice, blah blah blah. So she replaced the police chief, if I remember right, on the guarantee that he delivered somebody's head on a platter. So this then resulted in another individual being arrested with his girlfriend. This was Ian Griffiths and his girlfriend Bella. Is it Bella? Yeah, it's Bella. Bella Santos. Ian Griffiths, I could actually see that things just didn't fit. The first arrest was a complete sham. This one was even worse. I'd also heard from people at the funeral of Ella Joy that the police were actually asking for any foreigner, because this is from people that were at the funeral, because there was a reward, I think, of about 200,000 to 300,000 pesos, and they were sort of just asking people to bring somebody forward. It didn't really matter who, blah blah blah. We'll leave it at that for now. There was signs of tampering with the registration plate with the car and other things to try and make the crime fit the people. It's a lot more complicated than this. I went and mapped out the crime scene. Basically the area, I looked at the area and it just did not make sense. If you know the Philippines, if you're a foreigner, people can see you a mile off. So somebody being kidnapped from outside of their school, it just wouldn't happen. They would know instantly, but there's a lack of witnesses. Now, there's a long thing that happened with this, and I can't really go into it in too much detail, but let's just say that the murder was actually done by a Filipino. I'll leave it at that, but I actually had a lot of information, took it to several PNP officials, but they would not touch it with a barge pole because the arrest had already been bodged up multiple times already. So where am I going with this? Well, with Evan Iliadis, whatever his name is, his website, he talks about having informers in Cebu and all this sort of stuff. Well, here's a real crime. This is one that I could see there's something seriously wrong. I could see that Ian Griffiths and Bella were being blamed for it, but I contacted Evan about this, and he came up with nothing. He has no informers, he has nothing. What he has is reliance on expats bickering, and expats sending him bits and pieces that he then creates a complete story out of his own version. Ian Griffiths, by the way, has actually brought a case against several members of the Philippines establishment relating to the case. The case eventually collapsed, and I think it was 2 years Bella spent in jail while waiting for the bail hearing, because it keeps getting... They messed around with it. If you actually read the notes, you would see there was fake witnesses added, all sorts of stuff that would have actually collapsed the case if it was done, say, in the UK, because it was instantly obvious that it had been tampered with. But Ian Griffiths and Bella had nothing to do with it anyway. It was just they were convenient to arrest. But the important bit here, it's important to Bella and obviously Ian, is they have been shown to be innocent, but at the same time, I think theirs is still sat there with the lack of evidence rubbish. But Evan Iliadis was proven a fraud and a liar and a fake because he couldn't actually turn around and produce anything of substance. He didn't have any contacts, and the contacts I have, I worked with the Child Protection Unit in Cebu. The contacts I had wouldn't actually get involved because this is like being a good police officer and seeing that the task force next door has absolutely created a disaster. You do not want to get anywhere near it. And that's the reality of it, which is why I was trying to get some other resources that may have been able to swing things and point people in the right direction to arrest the right people. But hey ho, no. Instead, he started writing about me. So that's at that stage. Later on, I was actually writing a new forum. I was actually pondering setting up a Cebu forum, and I'd actually started writing it and putting it together. Just at the time where Paul Petra and there was a Jewish guy, I can't remember his name, had a money lending business go pear-shaped. Not because the business didn't function, but the Jewish guy had actually died, which sort of like locked some of the money in the bank. So that created issue with the investors, and expats being expats all started arguing and bickering on that forum, and a load of them hopped onto my forum. At the same time, the Paul had been at a resort with another expat, and something had happened between the other expat and his wife and Paul, where the other expat had alleged that Paul had assaulted his wife, punched her, pulled her hair, etc., etc., all in a drunken stint. So this guy wanted to bring charges against Paul Petra, and as such, he had contacted myself. He had also spoken with Evan Iliadis. Now, Evan Iliadis claims he paid all this money for the documentation for the arrest warrant. But in reality, he'd paid a small percentage. But there was an agreement between him and the guy that was trying to get hold of Paul for prosecution, that he even wouldn't do anything until Paul had been apprehended and arrested. So what do you think happened? Even wrote about it on his blog. Paul skipped country to Cambodia, and there's lots of arguing about this, money loans and all this sort of stuff. But because a lot of people had moved over to my new forum, all that information was becoming public because I'm fairly open with information. I don't mind discussing things openly because you get the truth, you get the facts, you get the information. You also get people actually filling in the gaps as they go. So when things started appearing, because even was allowed on the forum at the time, until he started lying and making things up and just doing his usual random ranting. So he eventually got banned on there, and then he started targeting other people on the forum, the moderators. James Musselwhite is currently experiencing it. Now, the funny thing is, I don't understand why he's chasing James now, because James does agriculture and stuff, and that was the whole point of him being on the forum. But he's now being accused of being a sexpat and other bits and pieces. But the reality is, he's nothing to do with that type of industry or anything else. He's happily married. He's a happily married farmer. But we'll continue on part 2.